Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. As we know, the new 1.34 update, or the whole Season 2 Reloaded update, just went live in Warzone, and then also Modern Warfare. We got a surprising amount of Modern Warfare content, but what was also pretty surprising about this update was the lack of weapon tuning, the lack of weapon changes that we were all anticipating quite a bit of. Of course, the FFAR is extremely dominant, or was extremely dominant. The AUG, the M16, the MAC-10, those can all be in the conversation as well. We were all assuming, hey, we haven't had weapon tuning in about a month now. We're probably going to see some pretty big changes, right? Well, lo and behold, the only change that was mentioned in the patch notes was a recoil increase to the AUG, so a recoil nerf for the Cold War AUG, and then nothing else was mentioned. That said, there's actually quite a bit that ended up changing with a lot of different attachments for the barrels, for the magazines, for the grips, so on and so forth. So today, we're pretty much going over all of these stealth changes that were made with the 1.34 update. As always, if you enjoyed the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. Let's go for 4,000 likes on this one. And of course, if you're new to the channel, I'm always covering everything going on in COD. From news to intel to updates, you name it, it's all right here. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. So let's go ahead, let's look at my my FFAR and MAC-10 class, because honestly, this is a class now that I don't think I'm going to be using anymore. This was one of my favorite loadouts to run back before this update, but because of these recent stealth changes, the FFAR is no longer this beast. And we're going to be looking at the FFAR in specific here for a lot of these attachment changes, but just know it sort of applies universally in a lot of senses because obviously all the Cold War attachments are pretty much the same on every single weapon. They all have the same list of muzzles, the same list of barrels, etc., etc. So let's go ahead, let's look at the FFAR attachments here. This is my pre-update loadout, basically. I've got the agency suppressor, of course, the reinforced heavy barrel, the field agent grip, the 50-round fast mag, and then also the Raider stock on there as well. And let's just go category to category and see what we're looking out for. Now, basically, the attachments you want to be focusing on whenever you're building a loadout on any given Cold War weapon. As far as the muzzles go, really nothing changed here. They ended up fixing the suppressor, and they said that it now actually has that muzzle flash concealment as a pro there. You can see that. This is all fine and dandy, but for the most part, these all work as intended. But as we know, there's really not much of a point in using anything but the agency suppressor. It's going to keep you off the minimap, which is a huge advantage to have. And it's also going to increase your recoil control, vertically at least. It's going to increase your bullet velocity and your range, which is four great pros to have with minimal cons there. Reduced aim down sight speed, reduced aiming stability, but you can make up for that with other attachments. So this category, nothing really changed. Agency suppressor is without a doubt still the way to go. Now, when it comes to the barrels, obviously, some of the Cold War weapons have different named barrels, but they do the same thing. So, like, if you compared the FFAR and, say, the Krig or the AK-74U, the barrels are going to have different names, but the pros and the cons are going to be the same for the same numbers. So the first barrel will have the same pros, second will have the same pros and cons. You get the gist of it. So when it comes to these barrels now, one of the patch notes said that they actually updated some of the Cold War barrels not working as intended, not having accurate pros and cons. You can see one of the main barrels here, the takedown barrel, which I know a lot of people used on the FFAR, was actually changed. Previously, the takedown barrel was used on a lot of, I would say, faster FFAR loadouts. A lot of people like to use the FFAR as a secondary with things like the AUG, maybe the Kar 98K, the Tundra, as sort of that close range based weapon. Obviously, it's one of, if not the very best close range weapon in the entire game. It was super effective in that area. And the takedown barrel actually would increase your range or your velocity, since they're obviously correlated, and then also your strafing speed as well. So you'd be a little bit faster. That'd be a huge bonus to have. You could tie that in with B-hops, and if you had good movement, the takedown barrel was an incredibly effective attachment on the FFAR. Obviously now, though, it no longer has that strafing speed pro, and instead, that has been moved over to the task force barrel, which actually increases the range a little bit, the velocity a little bit, and now the strafe speed a little bit, but it also has the cons of reducing your recoil in all areas, both vertical and horizontal. And it's honestly not really a great recoil pattern. I've gone ahead and I've tested these before, and by far, the task force recoil pattern, especially when you get into some of those medium range fights, really is not ideal. It's a tougher pattern to learn. It's more annoying to have to control in game. So I never really used the task force before, and honestly now, I still don't really see myself using this because the reinforced heavy to me just feels like the most solid barrel choice. It increases the range, it increases the velocity, not necessarily to like the maximum velocity you can have with this weapon. That'll be actually on the Ranger barrel. This is what's going to give you the best velocity possible. But the tie between the velocity and the range here, I feel like is the most consistent. Yes, it has some cons. Again, you can kind of work around those. So I still feel like reinforced heavy is going to be the go-to barrel on the FFAR, whether you're using it for primary, you have a little bit more medium range based fights with this thing, or on a secondary as like sort of a support option with a sniper or maybe another rifle or something like that. I think reinforced heavy is going to be the way to go still. And on most weapons, I'd say that's probably the case. These middle barrels here are usually the most consistent all around. Now, for the lasers, nothing really changed here. All of this is still accurate from my understanding. The Tiger Team Spotlight is actually super effective to use on weapons like shotguns, some of the SMGs like the MAC-10. It makes you super, super fast, so you can just zoom around the map at hyper speed, basically. But for the most part here, I'd probably go with the Ember sighting point, since obviously, as you can see, that's going to increase your range a little bit. However, that ends up working. And then it also is going to help out your hip fire accuracy as well. So between these two, that's probably my go-to choices here. If you're using a shotgun, the 5mm laser could also be a viable option, but these last two are really what I'm looking for in this category still. Optics, nothing changed. This is all personal preference. Obviously, the 3x is a very, very popular choice on the M16, on the AUG, on the Stoner. If you're using more of a close range based weapon, the Microflex LED isn't bad. The Quick Dot LED is not awful either. But like I said, this really just all comes down to preference. For the stocks, honestly, nothing really changed here. It's pretty much all the same pros and cons still. The first couple of stocks aren't bad. They're not going to give you like some insane stat boosts. Usually what I'm looking for here is the last 3 stocks. It's going to be like no stock or the CQB pad stock in most cases. Then like the combat stock, and then the Raider stock or something similar to those. Like I said, the names can differ depending on what weapon you're using. But usually my go-to here is either the combat stock or the Raider stock. Raider stock and weapons that I want to be more agile and more mobile with, because it's going to give you some insane mobility. Obviously, the stat bars aren't the most accurate thing in the world, but you can see the pretty big increase there on that. The combat stock, though, is going to give you some insane ADS strafing speed movement. So if you're in some more like medium range based fights, that can also be super useful for that. But for the most part, I'm usually leaning towards the last stock, especially on the FFAR, which will break down the full setup here in just a second for this as we get through the rest of the attachments. But yeah, Raider's pretty much my go-to there. For the grips, nothing really changed here. Again, the first couple of grips really aren't going to be awful choices if you have a lower level weapon, but Field Agent, or I believe it's Spetsnaz grip on some of the other weapons. The 5th grip in most cases is usually the go-to. Speed grip is honestly usable right now. The sprinting move speed is obviously a bit better there. So if you want some better movement speed on like the FFAR, for instance, wouldn't be a bad choice, but usually I'm gonna go with Field Agent grip just because that's gonna, I feel like, give me some better options. I can use it in some more versatile ways. Close range, the recoil is not gonna be that bad, but in medium range fights or even in longer range fights, if I have to engage at that range, it's gonna be able to help out with that control a little bit. So I'd still recommend Field Agent. Now, the ammunition is a very, very big category. I would say probably the most important category of this entire update because a lot ended up changing here. First things first, if you're running the fast mag on any weapon from my understanding, the M16, the AUG, the FFAR, the MAC-10, if you're running this final magazine, whatever it is, the 45 round fast mag, the 60 round fast mag, the 50 round fast mag, take it off. Just delete it right now. The ADS is so slow with it. As you can see, the con is an aim down sight time reduction. Previously, it was there, but it really wasn't anything major. Now, though, you're at a snail's pace, man. You're at a turtle's pace. You're not winning that gunfight if you have to try and get your sights up first if you have the fast mag on. That was a very, very big stealth nerf that they made with this update. The 50 round fast mag on the FFAR and a lot of the other final fast mags are now pretty, I'd say, rough in that ADS time department because they're supposed to be heavier. They're supposed to have that sort of con to balance them out, since obviously if you can have a large magazine and reload it fast, it's going to be a go-to attachment. It's going to be not an overpowered attachment, but probably an overused attachment, I would say. So in that case, what are we looking for instead? I can tell you it's not the clamp mag. That's really not a go-to here. The standard 38 round mag, I don't think is really worth it. It's going to hurt your reload quickness a bit. You're only getting, what, like 13 extra bullets on the FFAR in specific here. The jungle style mag, not it either. So you're pretty much left down to 2 options. The 38 round speed mag or the standard 50 round mag. So depending on how you want to use the FFAR specifically, or any other given gun in this case, if you're looking for some more close range fights, that's probably going to lead you to using one of these. If you're more of a versatile player, you got some close range and some medium range in there, maybe even some long range too, then you're probably going to be leaning a different direction. So when it comes to the 38 round speed mag, what I love about this is the ADS time really isn't too bad. It says that it does decrease it, but it feels pretty fast, all things considered. And you also get an insanely fast reload. I want to say it's faster than the fast mag for the 50 round. Don't quote me on that. I haven't tested the exact times though, but it does feel very fast from what I've tested. So in this case, if you're using the FFAR as a secondary, if you're using it with a CAR or an AUG or an M16 or even an AMAX, whatever it may be, if the FFAR is your close range weapon, I don't think using the 38 round speed mag is necessarily a bad option. The problem is you're gonna have to reload a lot. Luckily, you can do it fast, but you're gonna have to reload a lot. It'll be just like the AS Val, for instance, which is really good because it has an insane TTK, but you're not gonna be able to get triple kills without having to reload. You're gonna have to reload whenever you go to finish it down. You know, trios and quads, I think, is gonna be the problematic areas for trying to use the speed mag consistently. Solos and duos, it should be fine, but I would say use the speed mag if you're using this as more of an SMG style AR. And then if you're trying to use this as more of a primary, you're using it for those medium range fights, maybe some longer range fights here and there. That's when I'd say the 50 round mag would come into play. The reload is going to be a bit slower. The ADS time is going to be a bit slower as well, but obviously you're not going to have to reload as often. You can get easier double kills, maybe some triple kills, and then you can also clean up your kills a lot easier too. So just take that into consideration depending on how you use the FFAR in specific. That's sort of how I determine what mag you want to use. And then finally with the rear grips, these do actually now apparently work as intended for the most part. They finally do help with your aim down sight time. I know JGod has tested this on some of the snipers and some of the actual primaries as well. And things like the Serpent Wrap now actually do what they say. They are going to increase your aim down sight time, and that can be really useful on certain weapons. Obviously on snipers, you want that faster ADS. For the FFAR, when we look at our setup here, agency, reinforced, field agent, 38 round speed mag, and raider stock, I don't think it's necessarily worth to trade out any of these for a slightly faster ADS time. If you were going to change out anything, it would probably have to end up being that raider stock, which I feel like is such a prominent aspect of this setup because it makes that mobility so much better. To me, at least, the pros outweigh the other pros in the case of raider stock or any stock versus a rear grip. But if you're looking at snipers, let's say, I do think it'd probably be worth using in that case. But just a heads up, the Serpent Wrap is now working as intended. It's going to end up increasing your ADS time, or technically lowering your ADS time. It's weird how we use these phrases. Increases you'd think would make it slower, but it's actually making it better. But yeah, Serpent Wrap, definitely a go-to in this category. I believe the Jungle Grip is also working pretty well. Drop Shot is a possibility here. I wouldn't really use the Airborne Elastic Wrap simply for the cons there. It's just not necessary. Serpent, though, like I said, is probably the most favorable in this category. So yeah, this is the new FFAR setup that I would recommend. And like I said, this the stuff that we talked about today sort of applies to all the weapons and all the attachment categories, since for the most part, they all pretty much do the same thing on all the weapons. So just be mindful when you're looking at other weapon builds, what we talked about in this, what we want to look out for in the barrel category, in the ammo category, in the rear grip category, so on and so forth. But yeah, hopefully this video helped you guys out. If it did, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you want to stay up to date with everything going on in COD, news, intel, updates, it's all right here. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. Once again, and as always, thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.